turn to God in prayer. Lord, the psalmist says that your word is hope. And that couldn't be more appropriate for a day like today as we share in and kindle our hope for Jesus to return. You tell us what that means for us in your word. And so as we read and reflect upon your word this morning, we pray and we ask that your word would be hope for us. Lord, I pray too that as I speak, my words may be those of clarity and love and grace and truth. In Jesus' name, amen. Brothers and sisters in Jesus Christ, 2 summers ago, summer of 2011, our family decided to try, emphasis on the word try, to take a vacation to Portland, not far. Plan was to go up, spend a day, a couple of days maybe in downtown, seeing the sights of the city, do some hiking in the gorge, and just spend some time away. So we got up there, checked into the hotel, and did a little swimming, went to bed. Halfway through the night, one of our kids woke up sick, like really sick. And a couple hours later, child number 2 woke up sick, like sick. By morning, it was child 1, child 2, and one of the parents, won't say which one, sick. All of us really sick. And I don't know if you've ever had a vacation like that, but if you're away from home and you're sick, you want nothing more than to go home. You want to be in your own bed, your own home, surrounded by your own familiar surroundings. You don't want to, you could be anywhere in the world, the nicest place in the world, but if you're sick, you want to be home. Now, my goal in the next, today and the next 4 weeks leading up to Christmas, is to awaken that feeling in you. Now, I explain that because you're thinking I'm some sort of masochist sadist if I want you to feel sick. I don't. What I want you to feel is homesick. I want to awaken, during the month of Advent, I want to awaken a longing, an expectation, a hope for home, for your true home. Advent, as you probably know, is a time of expectation. Traditionally, it's when the church reflects on the longing of the people of Israel for a Savior to come. We look back at the way the prophets looked forward to a Messiah who was going to come and save his people, right? That's preparing for Christ's first coming. But Advent is also a time to kindle a hope for Christ's second coming. Jesus came into this broken, fallen, sinful world to be a Savior, to set us free from the power of sin. But he promises to come back and to restore this world to everything that it was intended to be. He promises one day he will return and make all things new again. And on that day we will enjoy for eternity the glory and the delight and the magnificence of heaven. And so Advent in that sense is a time where we focus on the hope of heaven. We focus on the hope of heaven. And during this time, we're going to be looking at, we're looking at a number of things that heaven entails. New bodies, new creation, new purpose, new relationships. All these things are involved in longing for heaven. I don't know what your sense is when you think about heaven. I don't know if it excites you, if you haven't thought much about it, if you wonder about it. I do remember an experience, I think I was in high school, and there was a young gal that I knew kind of connected to a youth group that I was in, and she was real honest. Topic of heaven came up, and she said, you know, I have to be honest. I'm not excited about it. I don't look forward to it. She even went on, she says, honestly, when I think about heaven, I think it's going to be boring. Now, probably none of us would say that. I don't think so. But on the other hand, I also know that when we think about heaven, I'm not sure that we get super enthusiastic or excited. We know it's coming, we know it will be good, but does it change how you live today is the real question. Does it make a difference? When you think about heaven, does it energize you? Does it motivate you? Does it capture your heart and your mind in such a way that there is a deep longing for heaven to come? Does the hope of heaven change how you live today? That's the question. That's what we're going to be looking at over the next 4 weeks. The hope of heaven and how it changes how we should be living today. Now, this morning we're looking at one particular aspect of heaven, and that is the promise, see it on the screen behind you, hoping for renewed bodies. One of the things that heaven entails is our bodies will be renewed. Now, Paul is addressing that here in 1 Corinthians chapter 15. And when we read these words, I'm not sure if you felt maybe Paul may have been lacking in some pastoral sensitivity. Because if you look at verse 15, Paul raises these rhetorical questions. He says, how are the dead raised? What kind of bodies are they going to have? And you're thinking to yourself, that's a good question. I've kind of wondered that myself. What kind of bodies are we going to have in heaven? How will we be raised from the dead? And no sooner do you agree with those questions and you identify with those questions, and Paul says, how foolish. You're thinking, I didn't think that was such a foolish question. But you have to understand where Paul is coming from. Paul is writing to a church in Corinth, and the church in Corinth was heavily influenced by Greek thinking, Greco-Roman culture, Greco-Roman worldview, Greco-Roman thinking, especially when it came to the human body. And the Greeks had a very distinct view of what the human body was. They actually didn't think highly of the body at all. The Greeks, actually Plato, you all know Plato, right? One of the most foundational thinkers of Western civilization. He said this about the human body. He said, the body is a hindrance and it even imprisons the soul. The Greeks thought that your soul was what mattered more than anything else. Forget the body. The body's a prison. It's a shell. It's a container. It holds the soul. And then when you die, you can be done with that body. You can throw it away. It doesn't matter. Your spirit, your soul lives on. That thinking had influenced the Corinthian church. In fact, if you look back, page or two, verse 12, Paul says, he asks the question of the Corinthians, how can some of you say there is no resurrection? And let me explain what he's saying there. He's addressing the Corinthians who said, you know what, Paul, the body doesn't matter. It's just a shell, it's a prison, it's a container. There is no resurrection of the body at all, period. The body, just put it in the ground, get rid of it, it's done with, and nothing more matters. So they responded to the teaching, the Christian teaching of the resurrection with, what resurrection? The body doesn't matter. Now, I want to pause there for a moment and just tease that out a little bit, because I'm not so sure that we have totally done away with that mindset. I mean, I know we all believe in the resurrection of Jesus, and we profess, we say together, when we say the words of the Apostles' Creed, for example, that we believe in the resurrection of the body. But I also know that from time to time I run into thinking that maybe suggests we somehow diminish the significance of bodies. And let me put it to you, and let me ask it to you this way. Well, let me first say, they did a survey or a study some years back. The study is a little old, maybe a little bit out of date, but I think it's still relevant. They asked Christians, so keep in mind, these are not general population. These are people who believe in the traditional views of the traditional Christian teachings. And they said, do you believe in the resurrection of the body? 2/3 of the people who responded said no. And they kind of pulled that apart, and they found a lot of people believe, yeah, you die, you go to heaven, but you're just a spirit. When you get to heaven and when Jesus returns and for eternity we'll just exist in heaven as kind of vague spiritual beings that have no physical, tangible body. So ask yourself that question. When you think about heaven, when you imagine yourself in heaven for eternity, just a little technical clarification, this is not, when you die, if you were to die today, you'd go to be with Jesus and you would be there in spirit, your body is buried, but on the last day, the dead, we say, the dead are raised, and the body is resurrected. And then after that, for all eternity then the question is, do you think that you will have a physical body? Do you think you'll have a body with muscle and tissue and skin and bone and hair and eyes? And will you have the ability to eat? And will you taste and touch and run and play and do all the things that we do with our bodies? Think about that for a moment. Will you have a body in heaven? Do you think you will? And if your mind is saying, well, something about this holding together a body in heaven, something doesn't seem quite right about that. It doesn't seem to really fit. Ask yourself, why not? What leads you to believe that your body doesn't belong in heaven? What is it that leads you to believe that somehow our bodies aren't fit for heaven? Ask yourself that. What leads you to come to that conclusion? Paul responds to this beginning in verse 12. And again, we didn't read this whole section, but let me summarize it for you so that we can put the text that we looked at right in its context. Beginning in verse 12, Paul, he says, listen, you know and we believe that Jesus was raised from the dead. He was raised bodily from the grave. When Jesus was resurrected, he didn't come out of the tomb as just a spirit or a ghost or something like that. Jesus was raised from the dead. And we know that the Gospels bear witness to this. Jesus, for example, walked along the road. He recognized his disciples, and when he allowed them, they recognized him. Jesus went on the beach, he built a fire, and he ate fish with his disciples. He talked with them, they touched him. Jesus, when he was raised from the dead, had a physical body. Now in verse 20, Paul then expands on this. He says, now, we know that Christ had a body, and don't you know that you are first fruits? Talking to the church, you believers are first, or Jesus was the first fruits, and you are those who follow. Now, what in the world does that mean? Well, Paul is very simply saying that what happens to Jesus happens to those who belong to him, or those who have faith in Jesus. In other words, Jesus is the first one to experience resurrection, but he's not the last one. He's the first. Those who are in Christ will share in what he experienced. In other words, Jesus was raised from the dead bodily, in the body, in the flesh. Those who are in Christ will also be raised from the dead, physically, in the body, in the flesh. And if you look at our text, Paul concludes this section by saying the very same thing in verses 45 through 48. It's a rather... I think you read it and it sounds a little bit unclear what Paul is saying, but let me just summarize it by saying, Paul in verses 45 through 48 is saying, listen, there are those who are in Adam, in the flesh. They're made of the dust of the earth, made of the ground. If you believe in Jesus Christ, you are given new birth in Christ. And now you have a spiritual rebirth, you're spiritually reborn, and so you also have the hope that what happened to Jesus will happen to you. Put it very simply, faith in Jesus Christ guarantees for believers a future resurrection from the dead in the flesh. A future physical resurrection. What happened to Jesus will happen to us. Jesus was raised from the dead physically. We will be raised from the dead physically, in the flesh. In heaven, we will have bodies. We will have flesh. Now, what does that all look like? What is it? How will we have bodies? What will that be like? Well, Paul answers that in our text. Now, take a look at verses 37 and 38. This is what Paul is explaining what are our bodies going to be like. In verses 37 and 38, he uses this metaphor of a seed. And he says, when you plant a seed in the ground, you know that it comes up, and it's not just a seed that comes up again, but it's something that is in some ways different, right? You plant a seed, a grain of wheat in the ground, it comes up wheat. You don't plant wheat and it comes up barley. You don't plant barley and have it come up as corn. You plant wheat, it comes up as wheat, but there's differences. I mean, a stalk of wheat looks very different from a seed of wheat or a kernel of wheat. So when you apply that to the understanding of the human body and the physical resurrection, what Paul is saying is that there's both continuity and discontinuity. Some things about our body will be the same when they are raised from the dead in the final day, and some things will be different. Some things will resemble what we have now, some things will not. Continuity and discontinuity. Paul goes on then to expand on that when he talks about different objects, different pieces of creation, all having their own respective glories. And again, that's, I think, several verses there, and you're trying to figure out what exactly is Paul saying. Really what he's saying is that our bodies now will have a glory in heaven that is different then from what it is now. The future glory of our bodies is different from what our bodies are like now. But let's unpack what Paul is saying. First of all, heavenly bodies will have continuity with our bodies that we have now. In other words, you will still be John or Frank or Steve or Barbara or whoever you are. You will still be you. You will have a recognizable identity. You will look similar to what you do now. Jesus, after all, again, was similar. He was recognized by his disciples when he gave them that recognition. So you're not going to look totally different. You're going to have all people will have a racial, ethnic background. John talks about that when he sees the vision in Revelation 7. He sees people from every tribe, tongue, nation, people, and language streaming into heaven. So that tells us that we will have ethnic backgrounds and different ones, and all together we will collectively make up a mosaic of different ethnicities and races and backgrounds. You will have, I think it follows logically that you will have, as a body, as a person, you'll have emotions, joy, curiosity, wonderment about the world around you. I think you'll have senses. You'll be able to taste and to touch and to see and to hear. Again, the Bible talks about all those things in the age that is to come. You'll sit down and eat at a banquet, so it follows that you're not just going to be eating tasteless gruel or something. You'll be able to eat food that you can taste and enjoy. John talks about hearing the glorious sounds of heaven and seeing things that are marvelous. So your body will be able to experience senses as it does today. You'll be able to experience body senses in your body. There's also discontinuity. So some of these things remain the same, some of them change when we are resurrected. And Paul expands on that in verses 39 through 44. And you notice that he says, we sow it this way and it is raised this way. We sow it this way, it's raised that way. He repeats that 4 times. He gives 4 qualities of the bodies that we have now that will be different from the bodies that we have when we are resurrected. Let's take a look at those. He says our bodies are raised, or our bodies are sown perishable, or perishable. Now, what does he mean by that? Well, perishable bodies, we know our bodies, they break down, don't they? Your eyesight begins to deteriorate as you get older. You don't see with 20/20 vision anymore, and that actually can be very painful. You can't see your loved ones in the same way you did. Your vision physically is clouded. Hearing. You lose your ability to hear your loved ones speak to you, your grandchildren talking to you. You lose that. Right? Your bodies break down. Your memory begins to fade as you get older. Your ability to recall certain things. You have to think a little harder to get at little details. Your joints kind of wear out over time. Some of you have had to have joint replacement, hip replacement, knee replacement, and you know that that's a pain. You can't run or walk as fast as you once were able to do that. But Paul says that's not going to be forever. When you are raised in the last days, you have a new body, you will be able to see with clarity and depth that you never even imagined today. You will be able to hear sounds. Your sense of hearing will be enhanced far beyond what you enjoy today. The prophet Isaiah, when he talks about the renewal of all creation, says, you will run and not be weary. You will walk and not faint. Can you imagine that? Imagine what that will be like. You won't have the same physical limitations that you may deal with today. Your mind will be clear and perfect and not clouded. Paul says that our bodies are sown in dishonor and raised in glory. Now, when he says dishonor, that can be a little bit, I don't want to say misleading, but we have to be careful to understand that properly. He's not saying that the physical body that we have now is shameful or repulsive. He's just saying that it's natural. It's one day when it's raised in honor, it will have a glory and a radiance about it that we don't yet imagine. Right? Our bodies will have a splendor about them that I think we can only speculate about. The Bible doesn't say a whole lot about what that honor and what that will be like, but I think it suggests that there will be something about the body that is more beautiful than we even can begin to imagine today. He goes on, he says, our body is sown in weakness. Now, Paul is using the word here, weakness, that has to do more with sickness and disease. And again, this one strikes painfully close to home, doesn't it? Some of us here, recently, presently, maybe it's been a little while, but you know the painful reality of bodies that deal with illness. Some of you have sat in the doctor's office and been told that it's cancer. Some of you have dealt with and do deal with chronic illness. Diseases, there's no cure. They can manage it a little bit, but there's just no way of fixing it, no way to cure it. So we know what that's like. Paul says that is not going to last forever. Our new bodies are going to be freed from disease, sickness, arthritis, cancer. Gone. Gone. What a wonderful promise. What a wonderful hope. And finally, he says our bodies are sown natural, and after that they'll be raised spiritual. Now again, he's saying here, Paul is saying that, not saying that we'll be raised just as spirits, he's saying that our bodies will have powers or properties about them that are different than we enjoy now. I think the best example, again, thinking of Jesus, who his resurrected body was still a body, was still flesh and bone and tissue and muscle and all that, but he also had abilities. He was able to walk through walls, and he was able, seems to move from place to place without having to physically traverse the entire distance. So somehow there's a quality about them that is more than we enjoy now. Going beyond that is probably speculations, guessing of what all that would be like, but naturally raised spiritually. The question, most important question in a way, what difference does all of this make? What difference does it make today that you will one day enjoy a resurrected, renewed, restored body? I can think of two significant applications, I suppose. The first one is this. If your body matters enough to God that he sees fit to redeem and resurrect rather than to trash it, then doesn't it follow that we too should be passionately concerned about using our bodies and enjoying them and caring for them as fully as we are able in this lifetime? I mean, I can think of no better motivation for good diet and exercise than the fact that God values bodies. I mean, one thing to work out and eat well because you want to, for vanity's sake, right? But it's another thing to say God values the human body. And taking care of it, eating right, doing the best you can to avoid, say, sins that would harm and damage the body, the body's going to be resurrected. Learning to appreciate the fact that we have bodies that do all the things that they do. Learning to enjoy the fact that we can run and exercise and taste and touch and smell. You know, it's funny, John Calvin, well, funny, it's I think, noteworthy, that's a better word. John Calvin, in one of his commentaries somewhere, he says, God gives us food, not just to give us nutrients and nourishment, and he says he gives us food so that we can enjoy tasting it and savoring it. And I like to cook, and I've always appreciated that insight, that the fact that our bodies can taste so many different tastes and textures is a gift from God. Right? Caring for your body in light of eternity. The second application maybe is weightier. I can think of no greater power, comfort, strength for those who are suffering in the body than to know that it's temporary and your body will be redeemed. If you have been the one that has sat in the doctor's office and the diagnosis has come to you, or if you're the one who is coping every day with pain, weakness, breakdown of your body, I can think of no greater hope than the assurance that this too shall pass. Paul says in Romans chapter 8 that our suffering now pales in comparison with the glory that is to come. Physical suffering, physical weakness, minds that wear out, rust out, it's temporary. It's temporary. It's preparing you for a glory that is eternal. And even when death itself strikes, death, the one thing that we would look at and say, that can ruin the body, that can destroy a body. The gospel says, no. Death is not the end. Jesus experienced death in its fullest, so that we never will. If you believe in Jesus Christ, you will never experience death in its fullest. It will swipe at you, it will take a stab at you, it will hurt, but it will not destroy you. Death cannot destroy the body. Christ has been destroyed in death, figuratively speaking. Death took him down to the depths, so that it will not take us down. Knew a young lady some years back. She was, I think, 15, 16, 17. And she had a degenerative neural disorder. She was born with it, lived with it all her life. She had mental impairments that went along with that. And I would stop in and I would see her from time to time, and we would visit a little bit. And you could see over time that the disease was taking its toll on her. Her body was really breaking down and wearing out. And eventually she passed away. A couple years back she died, 17 years older than she was. Now when I would visit her, we would talk a little bit, and she talked about her faith in Jesus, and I would think to myself, one day I'm going to see this young woman in heaven, enjoying a body that she has never enjoyed in this life. I thought, what a grand and glorious hope that is. Her body will be made renewed, will be made good, will be made whole and complete and free from disease and sickness and limitations. What is soon perishable will be raised imperishable. You long for that? You homesick for that? That's the hope we have. Renewed bodies, resurrected bodies for eternity. Let's pray together. Lord Jesus, I pray that you would stir in us that longing, that ache, really, for bodies that will be made new again. We delight in the fact that you didn't trash bodies, but you took one on. You came in the flesh and you redeemed our bodies from the curse of sin and death. Lord, some of us need that hope, and we need to cling to that hope day by day. Lord, I pray that you would help us to feed on that, help us to be sustained and strengthened by that assurance. Lord, some of us maybe have never thought about heaven in quite this way. Maybe we've never imagined ourselves. Maybe we just never given much thought to having bodies in heaven. But Lord, I pray that you would implant that idea in our hearts and minds, that we too may long for resurrected, renewed bodies. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.